Giannis Antetokounmpo. Milwaukee gets the call. Oh, good block. Giannis went past this. With the steal, he has Giannis behind him, gets to let it in.
I wish I could just run and 7 feet and run and just dunk. Like that takes no skill at all.
Shooter fouled. Nice side. Got it. Leads in. Knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul. Antetokounmpo. 5 remaining. Phoenix still has a timeout. Nice feed inside. Giannis tries a 3. It's good. Holiday inside. Antetokounmpo lays it up. The emotions come pouring out. One of the greatest nights in Milwaukee sports history.
The 2013 draft was a very infamous draft for just how bad it was, with the first pick being Anthony Bennett, a 6'8" big who would play just 4 seasons and less than 2,000 minutes, but one of the most interesting picks was at 15, as the Milwaukee Bucks would select Giannis Antetokounmpo, a little-known prospect that clearly had potential as almost a unicorn, but played over in Greece and nobody really had any clue how he would work out in the NBA. And in his rookie season, the Bucks would be absolutely terrible, falling out of mediocrity to a franchise-worst 15 wins, but Giannis would show some flashes. Antetokounmpo would show some playmaking potential and was a versatile player that could navigate his way inside, as well as legitimate defensive potential with his lankiness, but was still not great with just 6.8 points a game, as he would make all-rookie second team. There was some excitement around Giannis coming into his second season, as Jason Kidd would be the head coach, and his experience as being an elite playmaker would supposedly pass down to Giannis, who would play over 30% of his minutes in a guard position and would be the main ball handler, leading to Giannis averaging 2.6 assists, which wasn't a huge jump, but again he showed some of the future Giannis. He would continue to show why he's purely an athletic freak, as his ability to get to the rack was already there, and he would have some of the most insane blocks that we have ever seen. And remember, Giannis is just 20 years old. But somehow the Bucks would improve from 15 wins to 41 and would make the playoffs, and Giannis would have some good games, especially Game 3 where he would have 25 points and 12 rebounds when he would play 51 minutes in the 2 overtime game. But the most notable thing to happen would be Giannis getting ejected after a hard foul to Dunleavy, but even though he had a controversial postseason, he would still have one of the brightest futures in the league. Now the Bucks would miss the playoffs this season, and Jabari Parker, who had an amazing rookie season, completely disappointed, but Antetokounmpo would have an amazing season, cementing himself as part of the future of this team, and again he would show his athletic ability, with highlight dunks and even put up triple-doubles, as he actually played the point despite growing to 7 foot. In the second half of the season, last 28 games, Giannis would average 18.8 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 7.8 assists, showing that he can be a legitimate star, but his three-point shooting was the negative, as he had consistently gotten worse throughout his 3-year career up to this point. But with the newly acquired Chris Middleton, the Milwaukee Bucks were building a future. While the previous 3 years Giannis was always taking steps, this was the year he took a huge jump. Antetokounmpo would win Most Improved Player of the Year, as he was one of the most all-around players in the entire league, becoming the first player in the history to finish top 20 in all 5 of the major statistical categories, and improved his defense with 202 combined stocks, as his athleticism, quickness, and length made him one of the most versatile defensive players, finishing on the all-defensive second team for the first time in his career, and all of this combined with averaging 23, 9, and 5 at just age 22, Giannis would make the All-Star game, becoming the first Buck to be an All-Star starter since Sidney Moncrief 31 years before. But because of this superhuman season by the Greek Freak and some help from 50 games of Jabari Parker, 30 games of a recovering Chris Middleton, and Rookie of the Year Malcolm Brogdon, would make the playoffs as the 6th seed despite only winning 42 games, and would face off against the DeMar DeRozan Kyle Lowry Raptors. And in Game 1, the Bucks would put the league on notice. Giannis would score 28 and 8 on insane efficiency, and the Bucks would absolutely dominate the second half, with the Raptors scoring just 83 points in the whole game. And even though Antetokounmpo would have a great game, the Raptors would win a sluggish fourth quarter to tie the series up. But in Game 3 in Milwaukee, they would take over. Getting off to a rapid start, the Bucks would win by 27, but that would be the last win. The Raptors' defense would be dominant in the next 2 matchups, and despite blowing a huge 25-point lead, would barely close out Game 6 to eliminate the Bucks, but Giannis had a good postseason, and this team was on the way up. While this season should have been focused on Giannis, the Milwaukee Bucks had a lot of turmoil, trading for Eric Bledsoe extremely early this season to be the point guard as Antetokounmpo had permanently became the 4, but the Bledsoe trade wasn't just it, as Jason Kidd would be fired mid-season. Even though Giannis absolutely loved Kidd as the coach, the Bucks were just 23-22, and with the talent the Bucks had in the weak Eastern Conference, they had underperformed after his first season. The Bucks would also duo Jabari Parker returning from his second ACL tear, as he would never really be the same. But one player that would help step up for him was Chris Middleton, as the 26-year-old would play every game and average 20 for the first time in his career. But again, Giannis would also take a huge jump, and this time this leap would be into superstar status. Giannis's 27-10-5 season would put him in the All-NBA second team, and after consistently heavily improving for 5 years and being just 23 years old, there was a realization that Giannis was on a historic pace. This should not be normal. Just 5 years ago, he was a raw 18-year-old unknown prospect, but now was arguably a top 10 player in the association, but the Bucks had more to do. They would finish with 44 wins, just 7th in the West, and would match up against the young Celtics team, missing their 2 stars Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, but this was still a very good team, led by rookie Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Terry Rozier. Now, Game 1 would be a classic, with Giannis and Middleton combining for 66 points, and the game would be back and forth, even going into overtime with the Bucks even getting the lead, but Milwaukee would go ice cold. Over 2 minutes where the Bucks just could not put the ball in the basket, and Boston would pull away with a Game 2 victory, with Morris continuing to go crazy off the bench. The Celtics would go up 2-0, and with Giannis with his back against the wall, what would he do? Well, Game 3, he wouldn't do much. His worst game of the postseason by far. Everyone else would step up though, with Middleton scoring 23, Bledsoe and Parker with 17, and even Thon Maker with 14. Game 4 is looking like it was going the same way, but the Bucks lost a 20-point lead, and the Celtics even took the lead with less than a minute to go. But Brogdon would knock down a trade to regain the lead, and Booker would foul Horford, setting him to the line with just 29 seconds to go.
5 on the clock. Brogdon, they got to work quick. Brogdon with the left, tipped up and in. Giannis! Middleton got to go for the tie.
Yes, a putback by Giannis would win it, tying up the series, but Boston would respond as Marcus Smart would step up and Giannis would play passive, sending it back to Bradley Center for Giannis to take over in Game 6 with 31, 14, and 4, as he would extend the series to 7, but it just wasn't meant to be. Giannis would shoot 7 for 17 as Boston was in control by the fourth quarter and would win Game 7, eliminating the Bucks in the first round again. Over the offseason, the Milwaukee Bucks would sign Brook Lopez, a 30-year-old center who looked like his career was on the decline. It would be interesting to see the pairing of Giannis and Lopez in the paint, but that would not faze Giannis. Yet again, he would have the best season of his career, becoming even more efficient, a better playmaker, and a defensive jump, which would win the Greek Freak the MVP, beating out James Harden. But this wasn't just a great season for Giannis, but also the Bucks, as Milwaukee would win 60 games for the first time since 1981 with Marquez Johnson and Sidney Moncrief. And for the first time in Giannis' career, his team had real expectations to win in the playoffs. The first round matchup would be the Detroit Pistons, a team that was led by a banged-up Blake Griffin, somehow dragged to the playoffs, but this team never really had a chance. No game would really be in question, as the Bucks would sweep Detroit and move on to Boston. An extremely talented squad, but also very interesting. After last season's surprise playoff run to the conference finals and almost beating the Cavaliers and LeBron, the young guys demanded more of a role, but the vet Kyrie Irving did not gel well with them. That did not stray Paul Pierce, as after a 22-point win where the entire Bucks team didn't play well, he would be very confident in his Bucks prediction, but Giannis would prove the media wrong. The Bucks would win the next 4 games by an average of 16 points, as Giannis would average 30, 12, 6, 2, and 2 on 59% field goal shooting, as the Bucks would move on to the conference finals for the first time since 2001. Milwaukee would face off against the Raptors, a team led by Kawhi Leonard, alongside All-Star Kyle Lowry and Most Improved Player Pascal Siakam. But the Bucks would take Game 1, led by a fourth quarter Brook Lopez surge, and would dominate in Game 2. And the Bucks are quickly up 2-0, but everything would come crashing down.
George Hill. Got to go double. Leonard. Gets back. Leonard all the way and puts it down. Leonard with the steal. And Leonard puts it in. Ibaka feeling it. Yes. Triple team of Leonard. Open shot for Powell. Yes. Leonard somehow squeezes inside, scores. Here's Leonard for 3. Yes. Complete for three. Leonard working hard to locate shots and hits. Goes behind the back and lost it. Lowry with the steal. He has Giannis behind him. Gets to Leonard.
Milwaukee and the Bucks would absolutely choke, and though the whole Milwaukee team did not play well enough, a lot of the blame was on Giannis, as he would average just 20.5 points as Toronto would win the next 4 games, eliminating Milwaukee from what seems like a dream season. The Milwaukee Bucks would have one of the best regular seasons in the past decade, winning 56 games in the condensed 73-game season, and Giannis would yet again have the best season of his career so far, winning MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. But this season was very different, with the playoffs being in the Disney bubble, as there was a 4-month pause throughout the season, but when returning, the Bucks were still one of the favorites, with a core of Giannis, Middleton, Lopez, and Bledsoe, while the supporting cast of George Hill, Wesley Matthews, Dante DiVincenzo, Pat Connaughton, and Marvin Williams didn't seem great on paper. They would all play their roles, and most people would shoe the Bucks into at least the conference finals. The first step of that was to beat a Magic team that limped in to the 8th seed, a 33-40 team that lost 6 of the last 7 games heading into the playoffs and had just 2 players scoring 15 points a game, being Nikola Vucevic and Evan Fournier. But in Game 1, the Magic couldn't miss, as Vucevic would drop a monster 35-14, while Orlando would shoot 39% from 3 with 16 made threes, but the Bucks would get revenge in Game 2, as Giannis's 28-20 would somehow outmatch Vucevic's 32-10. The Bucks would easily win the 3rd game with Giannis's amazing efficiency, and the Bucks would win again in Game 4 with Giannis's amazing 31-15-8, and the Bucks would close it out a few days later. Miami would be the next matchup, who were led by Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. But this was the 5th seed, and the Bucks were the heavy favorite. This shouldn't be close, right? Well, Game 1 would be very disappointing, with Giannis shooting 4 for 12 at the line and scoring just 18 points, while Butler dropped 40 and Dragic had 27 as the Bucks got completely locked up, and Game 2 would be close, but again the game would end with Butler defeating Giannis. Antetokounmpo would foul Jimmy as time expired, giving the Heat a 2-0 lead and putting the Bucks back up against the wall. But again, Butler would dominate. The Heat would win the 4th quarter 40-13, with Milwaukee falling apart in the last 12 minutes, and Jimmy would score 17 of the Heat's 40 4th quarter points. The Bucks would win an overtime classic in Game 4, but Giannis would go down with an ankle injury and miss Game 5, as the Bucks would be eliminated. This was a huge disappointment, as the Bucks were legitimate title contenders, and big question marks started to fall on Giannis. There were some critics pointing out his shortcomings last year against Toronto, but this was different. The Bucks were supposed to easily win this matchup, and for a player that was putting himself into the best player in the league conversations, this was absolutely unacceptable. So with the doubters wrong, Giannis would have a big chip on his shoulder going into a prove-it season. Over the offseason, the Milwaukee Bucks would extend Giannis for 5 years, and after a couple years of rumors, with people even hacking into Giannis's Twitter and saying that he will leave to the Warriors, the Bucks now had some time to surround Giannis for the future, but they would get to work immediately. The Bucks would trade for elite two-way guard Drew Holiday, but would also acquire Bryn Forbes, Bobby Portis, DJ Augustine, and Torrey Craig, and would also complete a mid-season trade for PJ Tucker. This season, the Bucks wouldn't put as much effort into the regular season, something they did the last couple years, as they would finish with just 46 wins in the condensed 72-game season. But this team would still have a great season, with Giannis finishing on All-NBA and All-Defensive First Team, while Middleton and Holiday would both have very solid seasons, but missed the All-Star game. But at this point, the entire focus for the team was winning when it mattered in the playoffs. The Bucks would get the 3rd seed and would face off against the Miami Heat, the team that beat them less than a year ago. The core of this Heat team was very similar to last year, and the killer Jimmy Butler was coming off a finals appearance, and in Game 1 it looked like the Heat could take it, with Butler even forcing overtime on a shot that barely got off, and again in overtime it was back and forth, with Dragic knocking down a three with 20 seconds to go, but Middleton would hit a shot as time expired, narrowly giving the Bucks a Game 1 win, but everything else would go right. The Heat would go ice cold, as Jimmy was downright atrocious and nobody could knock down a shot. The Bucks would easily win the next 3, getting revenge and sweeping the Heat, but would then match up against their big 3 Brooklyn Nets. But that would not be for long. Just 43 seconds into Game 1, James Harden would exit with a hamstring injury, but the Nets would somehow prevail. And just 2 days later, the Bucks would get demolished, losing by 39, and would make a must-win Game 3 for Milwaukee, and it was a nasty game. The Bucks would score just 86 points, but they would score when it mattered, as Drew Holiday would get to the cup with just 11 seconds left, and Middleton would close it out with a couple of free throws. But in Game 4, the Bucks would catch another break with injuries, as Kyrie Irving would go down and miss the rest of the playoffs, and Giannis would drop 34 and 12 to tie the series. James Harden would return in Game 5, but was terrible for the rest. and he clearly was banged up and shot just 1 for 10 from the field, but KD went off. He would drop a monster triple-double with 49, 17, and 10, but Milwaukee would have to respond, and they did. The big two of Giannis and Middleton would come on for 68 points, as again Middleton would step up and they would force a Game 7. Giannis versus KD, how would this go?
Holiday with a series of fakes. That's to Middleton for 3. Yes! We're down to 2 minutes and 45 seconds as Giannis goes. Here's Holiday for 3. And on the move. Nice fake. And score. Here's Holiday fielding it. Does it again.
The previous possession.
Racing to the bucket and score! 106 and fakes Tucker and hits. Stoudemire looking to inbound. Jeff Green gets it into Durant. Here is Durant moving on Tucker. He turns, he shoots. Yes! With 1 second.
By Durant. Off balance, fading away. Tucker in his face and able to concentrate.
Turns, flips it, and it carries in. So the game, Middleton spinning and hits. Durant for 3 comes up with an air ball with 0.3 of a second.
Yeah, what a game that was. Durant had 48, but that somehow was not enough, as Milwaukee would make it back to the conference finals, this time against Atlanta and Trae Young. In Game 1, Trae would go off, scoring 48 and leading the Hawks to a narrow 3-point win. The Bucks would destroy Atlanta in Game 2, and Middleton would take over in Game 3 with 38 points and 6 made threes. Now, Game 4 would be gross, as Trae Young and Giannis would be out with injuries, as Giannis got injured with a nasty knee injury. But the Bucks would lose Game 4. The Hawks would barely win. The series was at 2-2, and the Bucks were in trouble. With Giannis' gruesome injury knocking him out, Bucks players would have to step up, and Chris Middleton and Drew would, as they would make the NBA Finals, winning the last 2 games of the series. Bucks, Suns. Phoenix, who had won 51 games, as Chris Paul really elevated this squad, and Booker, who was becoming one of the premier young guys in the league. The Suns would show that, immediately getting out to a 2-0 lead, despite Giannis averaging 31 and 15 through those 2 games. Now in Game 3, the Bucks would have to win, and Giannis would do just so, scoring 43, and Middleton would score 40 in the next game, barely beating the Suns and Booker's 42. The series was immediately tied up, going back and forth, and it was a best out of 3. And Game 5 was a complete battle, but the Bucks had got a 10-point lead going into the 4th quarter. But in the last 12 minutes, Book and CP3 did all they could do, even getting the game within 1 with less than a minute to go. But Giannis would come in clutch, and the Bucks were just 1 win away. And after having won the last 3, could Giannis do it?
Bridges running the floor, shot backboard. Giannis down. Antetokounmpo inside.
It's too much hand holding on to the ball.
The spin move, the finish. Nice feed inside, blocked by Antetokounmpo. An 18-point turnaround. Antetokounmpo gets trying to get it going. He's 1 for 11. Antetokounmpo gets inside, layup, he banks it.
Room and separation to get off his mid-range jumper.
And shot clock winding down. Booker blocked by Antetokounmpo. One of the best games of his life. Antetokounmpo gets the roll. Giannis tries a 3. That's good. When he was an all-star with the Sixers. Antetokounmpo goes against Crowder, gets inside. Banker won't go. The rebound, back up and in. Backs in. Leans, pulls up, jump shot. Got it. Giannis Antetokounmpo offensively. Holiday inside. Antetokounmpo lays it up. On the drive. Left-handed shot. Blocked it. Off the bounce. Throws it up. Bank shot. No good. Antetokounmpo inside. Nice entry pass. And the slip from the rim. It's the presence of Young. Antetokounmpo off the glass.
A 50-pointer to close out the finals. One of the best performances we have ever seen. And of course, Giannis would win Finals MVP, coming back from the disgusting knee injury to average 35, 13, and 5 on 62%, cementing himself as the best player in the league. The Milwaukee Bucks will be one of the title favorites this season, even though Brook Lopez would miss a majority of the season, but Giannis would again have a great year, averaging a career-high 29.9 points and would make All-NBA first team for the 4th consecutive season, while the Bucks won 51 games and were the 3rd seed. Milwaukee would face off against Chicago and trade off the first 2 games, with DeRozan's mid-range saving the Bulls and Middleton would also get injured, but Milwaukee was still able to destroy Chicago as they would shoot an extremely bad 39% from the field. Grayson Allen would also step up, but did even better in Game 4 with 27, and Giannis's 33 closed it out in Game 5 despite Pat Will's 23. Milwaukee would be on to the second round to the Boston Celtics, a team looking to break through to the finals as they haven't been there since 2010 in the Pierce Garnett and Allen era. In Game 1, Tatum and Brown would play very bad, combining for just 33 points as Milwaukee would take it, but they would step up in Game 2 and aside from a monster second quarter, Giannis would be pedestrian, tying up the series. Now, Antetokounmpo would have a nice bounce-back game, but Boston will make a late rally and even tie it up, but did not count, as Horford's putback would barely be late, but Boston would come back with an emotional Game 4 road win, as Tatum, Brown, and Smart would have amazing fourth quarters while Drew would shoot 0 for 5, ruining Giannis' amazing night. But Boston was on top late against Milwaukee in Game 5, so they would have to battle back, and a 14-point deficit wasn't enough as Giannis dominated, but they would be back next game as Tatum's 46 beat Giannis' 44 and forced overtime, while Giannis would rack up stats he went cold in Game 7, while Grant Williams took over. The Bucks would lose in the second round, failing to defend their title. Chris Middleton would not be the same this season, but in his sometimes absence, Brook Lopez would step up. Lopez would compete for DPOY, having one of the best years of his career at age 34, and would even average 16 points a game, most since 2017 with the Nets. But another player that was in award discussions was Giannis, as it was a three-man race with him, Jokic, and Embiid going for MVP. The Sixers' big man would end up winning, but Giannis had made All-NBA first team for the 5th consecutive season, and the Bucks were first in the East, playing a measly Heat that was just minutes away from getting eliminated to the Bulls in the play-in. But danger would strike. Giannis would go down early with a back injury and would not return till Game 4, where the Heat were already up 2-1, and Jimmy was about to take over with a 56-pointer. Just like that, a season where the Bucks had a title in mind and were one of the favorites, as the 1 seed was gone, knocked out in the first round. This team and Giannis can still very much win a title, as they haven't been healthy for many playoff runs, but that is a problem. Can Giannis consistently stay healthy throughout the playoffs, or was the 2021 run some luck that he actually remained healthy? Can Middleton and Lopez both stay healthy? Can Drew not drop in the playoffs? I believe all of these are true, but we have not seen it aside from 2021 where all of them come together. And even then, Giannis got injured in the conference finals. But time will tell, as it looks like Giannis has no intention to leave. But the clock on this group is ticking, and the Bucks might need to strike fast, or there could be a couple of bad seasons ahead.